I made a joke, laughed, moved on. I didn't cheat, I didn't flirt, I just said his brother was hot. People joke like that all the time, right? But apparently, to my boyfriend, that was the ultimate betrayal. One dumb sentence, and suddenly I'm standing outside at midnight with a pillow in my hands while he locks the door and tells me, "Go sleep with the only loyal one in this house, the dog." Now the neighbors are watching, my friends think I crossed a line, and my relationship, it's gone, all because of a joke I can't take back. Before I walk you through the full story, I just have a small favor to ask. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and let me know in the comments. What city are you watching from? It's always amazing to see how far this audience is reaching. The humiliation hit me like a slap across the face as I dragged my blanket across the wet grass toward the wooden doghouse in our backyard. The motion sensor light flickered on, illuminating my pathetic parade in harsh white light for any neighbors who might be watching from their windows. Behind me, I could hear the definitive click of our bedroom door locking, followed by the sound of furniture being moved against it. He was barricading himself in, like I was some kind of dangerous intruder rather than his girlfriend of 3 years. My name is Riley and I'm 28 years old. Until tonight, I lived in a cozy 2-bedroom house with my boyfriend Jake and his golden retriever Max. The house was technically Jake's since he bought it before we got together, but I had made it our home. My clothes filled half the closet, my coffee mug sat next to his in the kitchen cabinet, and my photos decorated the refrigerator door. Now I was being evicted to the backyard, like a stray cat who had overstayed her welcome. The doghouse was bigger than I remembered, built for Max, who weighed about 70 pounds. Jake had constructed it himself last summer, complete with insulation and a removable roof for easy cleaning. He was always proud of his handiwork, showing it off to visitors and bragging about how comfortable Max was during thunderstorms. I never imagined I would be testing its accommodations firsthand. As I crawled inside the cramped space, my knees scraped against the wooden floor and my head bumped the low ceiling. The smell of dog hair and old tennis balls filled my nostrils. Max's food and water bowls sat just outside the entrance, mocking me with their placement. Even the family pet had better living arrangements than I did right now. The whole disaster had started just 2 hours earlier, during what should have been a perfectly normal Friday evening. Jake had cooked dinner, one of his specialties involving chicken and rice that always made the house smell amazing. We were sitting at our small dining table, sharing a bottle of wine and talking about our upcoming weekend plans. The conversation was easy and comfortable, the kind of domestic bliss that I used to take for granted. Jake had been telling me about his younger brother Derek's visit planned for next week. Derek was coming to town for a job interview and would be staying with us for a few days. Jake seemed excited about seeing his brother, mentioning how Derek had been working out and seemed more confident than during his last visit 6 months ago. That's when the family resemblance topic came up naturally in conversation. I had met Derek several times over the years and always thought he looked like a younger, more polished version of Jake. Where Jake was sturdy and practical, Derek was lean and effortlessly stylish. Jake worked construction and had the weathered hands and sun-damaged skin to prove it. Derek worked in marketing and had the kind of smooth complexion that suggested expensive skincare products and gym memberships. The wine had made me more talkative than usual, and I was feeling playful and affectionate toward Jake. He had been working long hours lately and seemed tired and stressed. I thought a little teasing might lighten his mood and remind him that I found his family attractive. In my wine-influenced logic, complimenting his brother was basically complimenting him by association. That's when I made the comment that would destroy my evening and possibly my entire relationship. I laughed and said honestly, his brother could be a model, and he'd better not let Derek get too close to me, or Jake might have some competition. I even winked at him to make it clear I was joking around, trying to be flirty and fun. The reaction was immediate and devastating. Jake's fork stopped halfway to his mouth, and his expression changed from relaxed contentment to something cold and hard. The easy smile disappeared from his face, and his jaw tightened in a way that made the muscles in his neck stand out. The playful atmosphere in the room evaporated like someone had opened a window in winter. I tried to laugh it off, nudging his shoulder and telling him not to look so serious. I said it was just a joke, that obviously I thought he was the handsome one in the family. But Jake had already checked out of the conversation emotionally. He finished chewing his food in silence, took a long drink of wine, and then excused himself from the table without making eye contact. I sat there alone, staring at his half-empty plate and feeling confused about why my comment had landed so badly. Sure, it wasn't the most tactful thing to say, but couples tease each other all the time. I had friends who joked about celebrity crushes and attractive co-workers without their boyfriends acting like it was a personal attack. Jake was usually more secure than this. I spent the next hour trying to pretend everything was normal, while Jake disappeared into the garage to work on some project. I could hear him banging around out there, the sound of tools hitting his workbench with more force than necessary. When I went out to check on him, he barely acknowledged my presence, grunting responses to my attempts at conversation. By the time I decided to get ready for bed, I assumed his mood would pass overnight, like it usually did when we had minor disagreements. Jake wasn't the type to hold grudges or stay angry for long periods. He was generally even-tempered and reasonable, which was one of the things I loved about him. I expected to wake up to his usual morning coffee and sheepish apology for overreacting. That expectation was shattered when I walked into our bedroom and found my clothes, toiletries, and personal items piled in the hallway. My pillow sat on top of the stack like a cherry on a sundae of rejection. Jake stood in the doorway holding a blanket, his face set in an expression of cold determination I had never seen before. When I asked what he was doing, he said simply that the dog was more loyal than me, so I could sleep with Max tonight. He tossed the blanket at my feet and stepped back into the bedroom, closing the door between us with a finality that made my stomach drop. I heard the lock click and then the scraping sound of our heavy dresser being pushed against the door. I stood there for several minutes, staring at the closed door and waiting for him to change his mind. This had to be some kind of dramatic gesture designed to make a point before he let me back in. Jake wasn't cruel or vindictive. He wouldn't actually make me sleep outside over a stupid comment I had made while drinking wine. But as the minutes ticked by and the door remained closed, the reality of my situation began to sink in. I gathered my things and walked through the house, looking for somewhere else to sleep. The couch would have been the obvious choice, but Jake had apparently thought of that too. Every pillow and throw blanket in the living room had been removed and locked away with him in the bedroom. The guest room existed in theory, but we had been using it as storage for months. Boxes of Jake's old belongings and my seasonal clothes were stacked everywhere, leaving no space for a person to lie down. The floor was hard tile that would be impossible to sleep on comfortably, even if I could find enough space to stretch out. That left me with the backyard and Max's elaborate doghouse. As I carried my things outside, I couldn't help but appreciate the absurd irony of the situation. Jake had spent weeks building the perfect shelter for his beloved pet, complete with weather stripping and a slanted roof for rain runoff. Now his girlfriend was about to become its first human occupant. The night air was chilly and damp, with the kind of humidity that promised rain before morning. I could hear Max whimpering from inside the house, probably confused about why his usual sleeping spot was occupied by a person. The poor dog was as much a victim of this situation as I was, displaced from his comfortable routine by my thoughtless comment. As I arranged my blanket inside the cramped wooden structure, I tried to understand how things had escalated so quickly. The comment about Derek had been tactless, sure, but it hardly seemed worth this level of punishment. I wasn't attracted to Derek in any real way. I barely knew him beyond polite family gatherings and the occasional text about birthday plans or holiday schedules. But as I lay there in the darkness, listening to the sounds of suburban nightlife around me, I started to remember other incidents that might have contributed to Jake's reaction. 6 months ago, I had been caught texting with an ex-boyfriend about meeting for coffee. It was innocent from my perspective, just catching up with someone from my past, but Jake had been hurt and suspicious. There was also the time I had complimented our neighbor's landscaping a little too enthusiastically, mentioning how attractive and handy he seemed. Jake had made a sarcastic comment about whether I wanted to go help with yard work, but I had brushed off his irritation as insecurity. Looking back now, I could see a pattern of comments that might have chipped away at his confidence over time. The doghouse was surprisingly well insulated, but the wooden floor was hard against my hip bones and shoulder blades. Every time I shifted position, the structure creaked and groaned under my weight. I had never realized how many sounds a suburban neighborhood made at night. Dogs barking in distant yards, cars driving past on the main road, the hum of air conditioning units cycling on and off. Around midnight, I heard the back door open and Jake's footsteps on the patio. For a moment, my heart lifted with the hope that he was coming to apologize and invite me back inside. Instead, he set Max's water bowl near the doghouse and refilled it from the garden hose. He didn't speak to me or acknowledge my presence, treating me like I was as invisible as the landscaping. The gesture was both practical and pointed. He was making sure I had access to water, while also making it clear that my needs were being considered on the same level as the family pet. I wanted to call out to him, to try once more to explain that my comment had been a thoughtless joke rather than a serious expression of attraction. But something in his posture warned me that any attempt at conversation would be unwelcome. I must have fallen asleep eventually, because I woke up to the sound of Jake's alarm clock going off inside the house. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting long shadows across the backyard and highlighting the ridiculousness of my situation. I was a grown woman who had spent the night in a doghouse because of a stupid comment about her boyfriend's brother. My back ached from sleeping on the hard surface, and my clothes were wrinkled and damp from the morning dew. Mosquitoes had found their way into the doghouse during the night, leaving me with several itchy bites on my arms and neck. I looked like someone who had spent the night outdoors, which was exactly what I was. As I crawled out of the doghouse and tried to stretch the kinks from my spine, I noticed Mrs. Patterson from next door watching me from her kitchen window. She quickly looked away when she realized I had seen her, but the damage was done. The neighbors were witnessing my humiliation, and I could only imagine what they were thinking about the drama unfolding in our usually quiet backyard. Jake emerged from the house dressed for work, his lunch packed and his keys in hand. He walked past me without making eye contact, got into his truck, and drove away for the day. No good morning, no discussion about what had happened, no indication that he planned to resolve our conflict anytime soon. I was left standing in the backyard in yesterday's clothes, wondering what I was supposed to do next. My phone had been buzzing with notifications all morning, but I had been too disoriented to check them until now. What I found made my stomach drop even further than it already had. Jake had posted a photo on social media the night before, taken from our bedroom window and showing me dragging my blanket toward the doghouse. The caption read simply, "Even the dog deserves better." The post had dozens of likes and comments from Jake's friends and co-workers, most of them laughing at my situation or making jokes about karma and loyalty. Several people had shared the photo to their own accounts, spreading my humiliation to an even wider audience. I had become a viral example of what happens when girlfriends don't appreciate what they have. My best friend Sarah had sent me screenshots of the post along with a string of concerned messages asking what had happened and whether I was okay. She had also forwarded me a screenshot showing that Jake had changed his relationship status to single and blocked me on all social media platforms. The finality of those actions hit me harder than sleeping in the doghouse had. I tried calling Jake's phone, but it went straight to voicemail. I sent several text messages explaining that my comment had been a joke and that I was sorry if it had hurt his feelings. I pointed out that we had been together for 3 years and that one thoughtless comment shouldn't be enough to destroy our entire relationship. The messages showed as delivered, but not read, suggesting that he was actively ignoring my attempts to communicate. By mid-morning, I realized I needed to get ready for work, despite having no access to my usual morning routine. I used the garden hose to wash my face and brush my teeth, feeling like a homeless person performing basic hygiene in public. My work clothes were wrinkled from being slept in, and I had no way to shower or fix my hair properly. The walk to my car was a parade of shame, as more neighbors came outside to walk their dogs or get their morning newspapers. Everyone seemed to be staring at me with a mixture of curiosity and judgment. Mrs. Patterson made a point of loudly discussing loyalty and commitment with her husband while they stood on their front porch, clearly intending for me to overhear their commentary. At work, my co-workers had already seen Jake's social media post and the screenshots that were circulating through various group chats. The office receptionist made a comment about dogs being more faithful than some people, and several colleagues asked if I was okay in a tone that suggested they already knew the answer. I spent the day fielding uncomfortable questions and trying to focus on my job while dealing with the emotional aftermath of the previous night. During my lunch break, I received a notification that made my heart sink even further. Derek, Jake's brother, had shared the story in their extended family group chat with the caption, "Guess who thinks I'm hot?" The message had been screenshot and forwarded to me by Jake's cousin, who seemed to think I should know that my private comment had become family entertainment. The family group chat included Jake's parents, his siblings, several cousins, and various aunts and uncles. All of them now knew that I had made an inappropriate comment about Derek and that Jake had responded by making me sleep outside. I could only imagine the conversations happening around dinner tables and in private phone calls, with me cast as the ungrateful girlfriend who didn't appreciate her devoted boyfriend. I tried reaching out to Derek directly, hoping to explain that my comment hadn't been serious, and ask him to help mediate the situation with Jake. But Derek's response was cold and distant, suggesting that I had put him in an uncomfortable position and that he supported his brother's decision to stand up for himself. Even Jake's family members, who had previously been friendly toward me, were now treating me like a pariah. The afternoon brought another devastating blow when I discovered that Jake had uploaded a TikTok video featuring Max cuddled in his arms with the caption, "At least she never said my brother was hot." The video showed Jake looking sad and betrayed, while Max licked his face sympathetically, creating a narrative where I was the villain who had broken a good man's heart through my wandering eye and disloyal comments. The TikTok gained traction quickly, with thousands of views and hundreds of comments supporting Jake and criticizing me. People who didn't know either of us were weighing in on our relationship, calling me ungrateful, and suggesting that Jake was better off without someone who couldn't appreciate his devotion. The video was shared across multiple platforms, turning my personal drama into public entertainment. By the time I got home from work, I found my belongings had been moved again. Instead of being piled in the hallway, they were now sitting on Derek's front porch across town. Jake had apparently decided that since I found his brother so attractive, I should go live with him instead. The message was clear. If I wanted to make comments about Derek, I could deal with the consequences of those comments directly. Derek's wife answered the door when I arrived to collect my things, and her expression was a mixture of anger and disgust. She had obviously heard the whole story and had her own opinions about women who make inappropriate comments about their boyfriend's family members. She told me that Derek was uncomfortable with the situation and that I needed to find somewhere else to store my belongings because they weren't going to enable my behavior. The confrontation with Derek's wife happened in front of their neighbors and several children who were playing in nearby yards. She spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear, making sure the entire neighborhood knew that I was the woman who had caused drama by expressing attraction to a married man. The public shaming was thorough and deliberate, designed to make sure I understood the social consequences of my actions. I loaded my belongings into my car while Derek's wife watched from her doorway, arms crossed and expression stern. Several neighbors had come outside to witness the spectacle, their faces showing the kind of disapproval usually reserved for people who don't maintain their lawns or play music too loudly. I had become the neighborhood scandal, the cautionary tale about what happens when women don't know their place. With nowhere else to go, I called my friend Michelle and asked if I could crash on her couch for a few days while I figured out my next steps. Michelle agreed reluctantly, but I could hear the hesitation in her voice. She had seen the social media posts and heard the gossip, and she was clearly uncomfortable with the idea of harboring someone who had become a social pariah. That evening, while sitting on Michelle's couch and scrolling through my phone, I made a discovery that felt like a knife to the heart. Jake had posted a photo of himself and Derek at a local bar, both of them smiling and raising beer bottles in a toast. The caption read, "Some jokes age badly," and the timing made it clear that they were celebrating my exile from Jake's life. I still believed that Jake's reaction had been extreme, but I also understood now that it had been the reaction of someone who had reached his breaking point with my behavior. The doghouse wasn't really about one comment. It was about years of taking his love for granted and treating his feelings as less important than my desire to say whatever came into my mind without considering the consequences. The final blow came when I saw a photo of Jake with a woman I didn't recognize, both of them smiling at a coffee shop I had never been to with him. The caption was simple: "New beginnings." The woman was beautiful in an understated way, with kind eyes and a genuine smile that reminded me of how I used to look before I became bitter and competitive about everything. In that moment, staring at the photo of Jake with someone new, I finally understood the full scope of what I had lost. It wasn't just the house, or the relationship, or the social connections. I had lost the person I used to be, the woman who could inspire that kind of happiness in another person. The doghouse had been a punishment, but it was also a metaphor for how I had reduced myself to something less than human through my own poor choices. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications, so you never miss the next one.